Well, good morning, everybody. How are we doing? We are going to be having a webinar on plotting, some cool CTB and STB stuff, all the good stuff. I have a couple quick housekeeping items for you before we get going. I want to remind you that this is being recorded, so we're going to have this up on the website later today, and so it'll be there for your reference. But also, this is live right now, at least. So you're here and we're here, and this is live. So you have the ability to ask us questions. So, you're not just watching the recording right now. So please familiarize yourself with that Q&A button at the bottom. And actually, you can go ahead and click it right now. And note that it'll be a little quicker for you to type in a question when you do get one, but you're going to be able to see the answers that I type to other people's questions. So it makes a fun little companion while you're watching this live. I mean, you're here, so we're here. I hate to belabor it, but I feel I have to because, sometimes we do a webinar and we don't get a single question. And we're like, well, why are we even doing that? We can just record it in the office here and put the recording up. But we want the interaction. So please, there's no such thing as a dumb question. So please feel free to chime in as we broach subjects that you think of a question. Okay, so now I will stop talking about that. Let's get going, and Alex is going to take us away.
All right. Thanks, Jer. Good morning, everybody. Get ready for plotting in style. CTB and STB files explained. This is me. Just kidding. This is me, Alex Zahn. I do content creation, manufacturer relations stuff, usage support at Land Effects. And yeah, today we're going to talk about plot styles. So we'll start off with the presentation about duct management, which is actually about layer management. We'll start by defining kind of what our goals are. We'll go over first kind of the manual no table method, then this STB method, CTB method, and then we'll kind of relate everything back to CAD terms. So first of all, plotting. What is plotting? Well, that's just exporting a CAD plan out of CAD, either to a plotter or printer, or just as a digital file, like a PDF to your desktop. A plot style table is a collection of plot styles wrapped up into one file. There's two types, STB and CTB. A plot style is a collection of settings that describe how certain objects in CAD should appear when they're plotted. This, you can think of it as just a piece of paper saying, okay, color, dither, grayscale, all these different settings that your plotter or, your computer, when it's generating a file, used to determine how things should look. So we'll start with an analogy here. Imagine all your layers are ducks and you are a flock administrator. You got ducks of all shapes and sizes, hundreds or thousands at once. You got many different suppliers, many different buyers. You work with all these different people who use ducks in different ways. They all have unique yet valid preferences for how they want their ducks to look. So your job is you want to make sure that the ducks you deliver to your clients and partners meet their standards. You want to work with your clients and partners as their standards maybe change as well. You want to maximize the efficiency and how organized you are while you're working with your ducks internally. And you want to make sure that you can quickly and smoothly translate from one set of standards to another set of standards. Okay, so first would be the manual method. If you don't have any plot style table you're using at all, let's say maybe you just start off saying, okay, my client wants these particular ducks to be gray and hidden line, and they want these ones to look like this, these ones to look like this. Well, pretty soon we've got all these different ducks in our drawing that look really similar. It's hard to tell them apart. It's hard to work with them. They keep phasing through each other and stuff. So it's just a messy method and that's not going to work. So what if we do something a little more organized here? Let's start with STB, and this is the named plot style method. What we'll do is we'll give each duck a name for all of our ducks, and then each name is going to correspond to its own plot style. We wrap all these up into one plot style table, one file, and that would be the STB, named to plot style conversion. Okay, so what can we do with this? Why is this better than just doing it manually? Well, we can work with just the ducks' names, tell them apart easily in CAD, especially if we color them in CAD or otherwise alter their appearance so we can tell them apart, because only at the time that they're finally exported are those predetermined appearance settings going to be applied. So we can change them, work with them how we want in CAD and trust that, we're not going to make too many mistakes and we're going to be able to translate them over later. So one issue with this is we could have two ducks or two layers with the same name or with different names, but that look similar. And because they've each got their own plot style settings by name, they might come out looking entirely different. So this can be difficult when we're in CAD, in our duck warehouse, and these are running around and we're like, why are some of these yellow ducks coming out this way and some coming out this way? It can be difficult to track them down. We can also have ducks with different names and different appearances, but maybe they have the same plot style settings. So they each have their own unique plot style, but all of the actual details on here, they say to print the same. So in that case, they would all come out looking the same style, whatever those settings say. And that can be an advantage because you can have, multiple of these to tell apart, but at the same time, it can be a disadvantage because what happens if we have a new client maybe who says, hey, we use hidden line dash gray ducks for our office blinds. So you're going to need to change your CTB, all of your office blind looking hidden ducks, to something else. But you would have to backtrack from over here, try to find all of them that are supposed to plot with those settings, look back through the STB and try to track all of them down. And we're still bound to kind of miss some that way, having to backtrack like that. So we have some advantages over just doing things manually. We can alter layers appearance in CAD, so it's easier to work with internally. And another advantage is we can use multiple files now to quickly change the appearance across the board without having to, recolor or rename all these guys. But again, we still can easily confuse layers that look the same but have different export settings. And to change a particular final appearance, like just dashed gray duck, if there's 3 that point to that, we have to track that down. And again, we're kind of going to miss some. Also, then we've got one plot style per layer or per uniquely named duck, which means, as we add more and more, we can have hundreds, some offices even thousands, and it's just really hard to keep track of. Do we have any questions before we move on here?
We don't, but yeah, this is really good so far. So just a reminder, if you have any questions, please chime in on Q&A. I wanted to put in a joke about, duck used for autocorrect or something. This is the best ducking webinar I've ever seen. All right, keep going.
Okay, so we've got these drawbacks here. Is there any way we can maybe organize this a little better. Maybe we can keep track of, by final appearance setting, which ducks kind of point to that so that we can change them all at once. And this is where CTB comes in. Instead of having plot styles, one for each layer, each unique name, we can do for each unique indexed color. So there's 256 total. There's, color 0 up to color 255. And when we wrap all these into a CTB, now we've basically got 256 options for an output appearance, a plot style. So we can have multiple layers all point to the same one, or we can have, layers that appear different in CAD, where it's easy to tell them apart, but they've each got their own plot style by color. And maybe that plot style, this one says skinny line, or thin line, medium, and then heavy line. So we don't have to deal with heavy lines in CAD and all grayscale. We can have them all nice in different colors here. And then when we export, because of our predefined CTB settings, these guys will translate to line weights as we've decided by color. We can also have multiple different layers all with the same color, even with different names and different jobs. And because they're all the same index color pointing to one plot style, they're all going to come out looking the same with those same settings. So CTB advantages, we've got the same advantages as STB. We can alter layers in CAD for working and then trust that they're going to come out a certain way at the end. And we can use multiple CTB files to switch between, predefined different settings. The real benefit is managing plot style settings is much more clean, easy, flexible. We've only got 256 max. You don't have to use them all. If you're using, only 10 different colors, basically each different type of plot style or, line appearance on your final plan, you only need one index color for that. You can put that to as many layers as you want. Drawbacks? None. I can't think of any. If you think of any, you can tell us in the Q&A and we'll disprove them. Or if you're right, then we'll
I
change
think
everything.
there's the one is that, from the layer palette, you just see this layer is color 13. You're like, well, what the heck is color 13? As opposed with a CTB, an STB, you see that it's set to the medium plot style, so that's really the only drawback that I can think of for a CTB is that you kind of need your documentation. You need a printout like we have our LFX pins document that you can just turn your head and look at this sheet of paper that says, oh yeah, color 13 is thin. But is that really a big drawback? I don't think so.
In my mind, I feel like that would be a much easier document to reference than like an Excel sheet with 600 different layers and you've got to try to sort them by
Exactly. No, that's the crux of it. Exactly.
Okay, so that's enough of ducks. Let's move on and try to bring this into CAD. Okay, so here we are in CAD. Let's take a look at our layer manager. So we got all these different layers here, and you can see that some of them have the same colors applied. Let's look at color 13, for example. We use color 13 in our CTB file to represent 13 millimeter thick lines. That's our thin lines. So if we do Control P to bring up the plot dialog, up here on the top right, this is where you're choosing your plot style table. So actually, let's take a step back here. If we do none, this is like the manual method from the beginning. We just color each duck at the very beginning, and whatever we see in CAD, that's what we're getting out. And that may be fine as I have just a car, a hammock, and a table here, but in a massive plan, again, that's ridiculously hard to manage. If we do our CTB, here's what we're looking at. Each color, just like I was showing in the slides, each plot style is like a piece of paper with those properties. Each indexed color has its own plot style here. And the way that we use CTB files, basically the color, the screening or like transparency, and the line weight are what we kind of affect between these different index colors. Most of the other settings you probably can leave consistently. Things like pen number, that's kind of an archaic setting for older plotters and things. But again, you don't have to use all of them. We're not using color 2, for example. This description here is very useful. You want to put in here what this is for so you can keep track of things. For example, 100% opacity, default line weight, 0.25 millimeters is our color 1. Color 13, as I pointed out, that's our 13 millimeter. You can see that here. And let's see what that looks like now. There we go. So now, even though in CAD, those layers are colored and we see them showing up as colored, which makes it easy for us to tell, if we know which is which, how it's going to appear. When we plot it, it's going to follow those plot style settings that we had set for that index color. So 13, for example, it's black, 13 millimeter thick. The red ones, color 1, a little bit thicker, also black. And if we have anything colored in true color here, that is going to just carry that through. Yeah. Okay, so what about selecting between these? Just dropping down, here's some of the benefit of having different ones predetermined now. So we can easily just switch to a different CTB now. This one, we've just dropped all of the line weight settings down to 25% of their thickness. We don't have to change anything in the plan, anything in the layers. And now our lines are much thinner. So if you've got like a plan at a really zoomed out scale or something, and all these lines start getting really thick, it's very easy to just switch between those. Or if you've got different clients or different partners who have different settings, maybe they use one color for this thing and you use one color or the same color for something else. That CTB, having a separate CTB can be a quick and easy way to just switch between them, and you can still work exactly how you like to in CAD. Do we have any questions?
We had some good questions. Then, what about, how many plot styles do you really need? And how many, so if there's, are you quote unquote limited to 255 colors? But yeah, I think, you realistically have, 7, 8, 9, 10, really probably 5 to 7 different thicknesses of lines, and then your different screening percentages. And so 15, 20, and then you add a couple alternates, maybe 40, but I think that's definitely the art of CTB management. I mean it's a very important part of CAD management. Is okay. Well, what colors do we want to use, and how many? You don't want to be in a situation where you have 70 or 80 or 100 colors used. We've worked with offices that have that, and boy, that becomes a bit of a mess. But that was all. I don't know if you have a comment on that too.
And part of the benefit of CTB is that 13, as we saw when we switched over to another CTB, we can affect all the different layers that have color 13 applied across the board all at once, but then we still have the benefits of having our uniquely named layers in here, where we can come in and turn off all the vehicle layers or something. And if we affect the CTB, it just affects the 13 mil 13 color anyway. Any other questions right now?
Susan did ask a question here that I think is a good one, is regarding changing colors, and I just wanted to check with you if you were going to show that on that tool from the admin ribbon on changing line colors. Right there. But that's a very important one, and it's showing its age. We need to update that dialog box. But the important thing about this tool is not so much the changing the layer colors, but note the load and save buttons. And that's really what it was always intended for, is so you have a certain client, and we'll just make it simple. They use color yellow, and you're like, oh God, I hate using color yellow. And I want to use my preferred colors. And so you get a plan from them. You can run, you save this little change profile, so you can convert from their layer colors to your layer colors in just a couple clicks, and then do the same when you need to submit the file back to them. So that's what that tool was designed for, and that is a very, very helpful tool, and ridiculously simple. There's not a lot of code behind it.
And you can also come in here, save different preference sets. For example, same tool, if you click block layers here. Oh, I guess this is a different tool, huh?
That uses basically the same sort of thing, but yeah, this applies to converting from the any land effects block. This is the crux of how we're able to let you have your own color standards, and yet we provide all these blocks. So when a block is downloaded and inserted, we use color red for a certain desired line thickness. Well, you can set up here to have color red change to something you would prefer. If you want red to be a different thickness than what we use it for in our defaults. So our defaults are really quite irrelevant. You don't have to go with our layer color defaults. You just simply use this, and it will automatically convert from ours to yours.
Yep, there we go. So we could see like those 13, for example, changed to, we got the blue and we got this green now. You can see over here on the layer side, it's changed them. So what you would do then, is you would create a CTB to go along with that. You could start with the LFX one, for example, or start with yours, save as, and just save a new one. Webinar example. This is the location where it is going to save these plot styles. We do have a shortcut that I'll show you in a sec, but we can save that. We can say now that we're editing that new one I just created, and we can come in here and change things or use those layer recoloring to get it in line with that CTB file. Okay. And if you're trying to conform to your layer standards, we've also got this nifty document you can download, LFX pens. And this is showing, for example, all the different line weights that we use. If you are using color 13, for example, that's already a part of your office's CTB, you can then just in that block layer recoloring tool we showed, change color 13 over to 150, or if you're using 150, change it to 191. This is still going to plot as 13 mil. It's going to look the same when it's exported as this guy, but now you've moved it over to a different color, and 13 is reserved for your own settings. So when we come over here to, to edit it, for example, you would come down here to, or you would have your CTB, you have 13 with all your settings here, and you can already see, oh, what was it now? 150. If we go down to 150, there we go, still 13 millimeter. Okay. Any more questions here, Jay?
No, I think we're good for now.
Right. So there's another little document we use here too, if you're trying to combine your CTB settings and have land effects play well with it. Actually, I'll open this guy. We have this worksheet as well, so that you can kind of work through and determine which of your CTB colors that you're already using for your standards conflict with the land effects ones. You would just go here and say, okay, if we're using color 1 already for our own stuff, mark that, and then reference the pens drawing so that you can switch over the land effects one to a different color. All right, Jared, what do you think? Does that kind of cover the ways to change it, or do you think there's anything else that we should go over right now? Am I forgetting any tools that would be?
Well, yeah, I think that's good. I mean, yeah, if someone wants a little more info on that, we do have a webinar which kind of covers that more in depth. So, I think we can, maybe revisit that if someone wants more clarity on that. But otherwise, you're welcome. Just kind of go ahead for now.
Okay. Well, that is pretty much most of what I had prepared as far as the tools we're going to show here. Again, if we come to these layer changing tool, we were talking about, setting it up for one claim or another. You can make all these changes and then save that as a line color change file that you can retrieve later. Again, that location where the plot style files go, that deep place in the CAD folder, you can also just drop them into your land effects folder under admin. If you put them in land effects admin, any CTB in here, when you boot up CAD, Land Effects will automatically bring that over to the AutoCAD folder for you, and it will show up in the drop down here for you to choose from. What else? Maybe we can look at the other parts of the plot dialog here. This is one that gets missed sometimes, plot transparency. You want to check that, especially if you have layers that use, you know, transparency. We have some in our blocks that for texture have half transparency. So if you don't check that, things may end up muddy. You may see PC3 files as well. These are related to plotting, but they're not the same as plot style tables. These are strictly related to the plotter that you're using. So you can use a particular CTB and, you know, switch between different printers and things, different file export types, and it's still going to look the same on export because you're using the same color to plot style translation file. All right. What you think that, Jer? This kind of went quicker than.
Oh no, it's fine. You know, we do have some more questions, which is great. So you can definitely go into things. We had a great question on just STBs. Is like, so so why do STBs exist? And I remember back in the day, the as more and more people were using CAD, particularly for different things, but for doing product creation, and the great example was always, you're trying to design a car or something in CAD, and you still need to be able to plot. So you want to be able to assign plot styles, but you also want to assign a color for rendering and for display. You want this car to look red, right? You want to render it red. And so those users of CAD wanted the plot style to be a separate setting than the color of the object. And so very viable in that usage case. In the architecture and engineering community, not viable, just simply not viable. I will die on that hill. That's fine. But just not viable for architecture and engineering. And so, just absolutely, nope, sorry, doesn't make sense. Because you're not going to say turn on, the only possible correlation would be say, oh, when I turn on color rendering, right? So I have all these true color settings and now I want to print it. Well, you want the true color to print in color. You would not want it, this kind of one way or the other. It's just, I'm going to say, I'll die on that hill. So, but a lot of people just got on board with STB for various reasons. And just like any of those weird CAD standards, a lot of people use STBs because they work with clients or agencies that are using MicroStation, and they will claim, and even though it's untrue, but whatever, they will claim that STBs work better with MicroStation, with the conversion process. But basically it's irrelevant. We've dealt with many firms dealing with, Department of Transportation and other agencies that are using MicroStation, and CTBs work just as good as STBs. It doesn't matter. But you know how it is once you're in that sort of MicroStation loop, so to speak. It's very hard to get through to those people. They're like, well, we use MicroStation for this, and you're like, well, you could use CAD. Nope, they're using MicroStation, and you're just not going to be able to convince them otherwise. And so, who knows what caused whatever particular office to start using STB files. Once they do, it's next to impossible to switch away due to stubbornness more than almost anything else. You spend all this effort developing these Excel spreadsheets and all these processes, and to now say, oh, now it's spend all this effort to move away, and there's not going to do it. So it's unfortunate that we have to address the STBs when, like I said, they're just not viable. I would definitely recommend, having to sit down buy the office beer or something and say, all right, we're going to talk about abandoning STBs.
Yeah. Just translate it over once, and then, I mean, part of the issue, right, is they probably have many layers with all these different names, and they're barely keeping track of them. So then it's okay, how are we gonna, the whole process of trying to consolidate them, like they finally got it working with all their different duct tape and yeah.
Oh, exactly. Well, any standard runs that risk, and that's always going to be that way because in addition to just simply all your processes, I mean, that's one whole thing right there. How many projects do you have that are in production? You know what I mean? And so are you and so that's a lot of times the hardest is to say, okay, um, at any given moment when I open a file, it might be using the old STB standard, or it was started after the transition. So now it uses the new CTB standard. And in a given day, you're working on two different projects and you have to use two totally different systems to print. And that is understandably really difficult. And so that also is a huge reason why it's so hard to switch a standard. So totally understandable on the switching standards.
Mhm. So what would you say for, maybe if you like to work with CTB, but you have um, a client or an office you work with that uses STB, how would you kind of bounce from,
Yeah,
bring theirs in and then match
it's
it to your standard?
exactly. You're gonna have to. I mean, I guess you're just simply gonna have to. The conversion process back and forth is not easy. But there is a command, whatever that command is. What is it? It's like, yeah, plot style convert. But you basically can configure a STB file, which essentially can convert back and forth between color, color and name styles.
Mhm.
Um, but it's a very cumbersome process, and the interface, like even this dialog box that you have up, is a classic example of, in my mind, ridiculously bad dialog box design.
Mhm.
So you've got things in here that just simply don't apply anymore. The pin number and the virtual pin number have not applied for over a decade. Why this is still here, I have no idea. So it's cluttering up the dialog box. It's very difficult to see. The single most important item in this dialog box is literally buried in the middle. Line weight is right there buried in the middle. And so that should be at the top, because that's what it is. The color correlates with the line weight. I want to see line weight first. Duh. So it's line weight and grayscale, and they're look at how far apart they are. And then screening, what's the difference between grayscale and screening? What's the difference between setting the color versus setting the grayscale versus setting the screening? It's a very cumbersome dialog box to use, and that's very unfortunate. Now you want to add on that wrinkle. Oh, I'm converting back and forth between CTBs and STBs. It's now, you're now using two very poorly designed Autodesk dialog boxes, and so it's not fun.
How about this view?
Yes, yeah, completely unhelpful. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, I saw some questions are coming in. What are
Yeah.
people asking here?
Let's see. Let's see here. So we've got definitely on, someone mentioning on the line type scale, but that is a little off topic. But definitely that is part of plotting, is the line type scale. But I think we're not really set up and don't have the documents and things for that. So I think we're gonna have to skip that one.
Mhm.
And also people chiming in that yes, microstation is the devil. So But you're saying you're about at the end of your content?
Pretty much, yeah. That's kind of what I had to go over here.
Yeah, I think the main thing is regardless, to step back a little from, I'm not sure if there may be some STB adherents who are perhaps stewing in their own juices or all these horrible things I'm saying. So again, some people do use STBs and that's fine, but regardless of whether you're using STBs or CTBs, I would say your fundamental system that you want is you want a handful of different files. So just like we have, so if you go back to the plot setup dialog box, so we have those LFX 50% CTB and 25% and 100% or so-called regular. So you want to be able to easily toggle between these different files to give a quick change to how everything works. You want to, as much as possible, be able to do that. I've heard from some offices as they go, oh, when I need to do a reduction print, I have to go into my layer palette and sort all of my layers. And, they do all this and they're changing the layer colors. And like, no, 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 no. Just use a different CTB file.
Mm,
And the same would apply for STBs also. So if you want to do just tone down the line weight and give a nice grayscale to everything, rather than doing layer overrides, just simply pick a different CTB file. But now when you only want to override or you only want to grayscale the things in, say, an XREF, that's when you're going to want to have to use those layer overrides. So that would be, but the main thing is to really see it from that point of view of, oh, what should my different CTB files be? And what do I want them named, and make it hopefully easy to switch between them and easy to document when you do edit those CTB files. If you do go back to editing one of them,
mhm.
one thing is note the description. Please use descriptions. I think that's literally the most important thing. This will be my last comment. I think the single most important thing of using this hideously designed dialog box is to put in the description box for the colors you actually use. It's that simple. So the colors that you don't use, put the word unused in the description, you know, so that it's clear to any swinging employee who happens to be looking at this file in 1 year or 1 day, that they go, oh, what the heck is color 30 used for? That's what the description is for. It'll take you an hour to document the heck out of your primary CTB file. And, a future intern in 15 years is going to thank you.
Mhm. Yeah, I think it's all about putting in a little bit of that effort and forethought ahead of time so that down the road things are not, you know, lost from your understanding and unorganized. And it's kind of the same it's like the same principle when you get down to it as like blocks, would you say? Like you're putting a little bit of that work and preparation ahead of time, saving that so you can use that, um, down the road as much as you need.
Oh, exactly. And it's the crux of your work when you really think about it. If you're working in CAD, your fundamental product is that outputted plan, right?
Mhm.
So you have to be able to generate that. And this is the only way you can generate, and you don't want everything plotting at the same line weight. So it's a ridiculously important part. This is the only way you can get your product out. So absolutely it's worth spending that time. And so, like, as I see on this, like, the fact that our primary CTB file does not have what I just said, which is to say unused in the description for the colors that are not used. I think we could improve those descriptions.
Mm.
But another quick note on this is, I know someone out there might be saying, wait a minute, Jer, you just said this dialog box is horribly designed. Why don't you make a better one? I'm going to tell you a fun trivia fact. CTB files are encrypted. Why? Why Autodesk chose to do this? Would note that from this entry, from table view and form view, you can view everything inside this. Why would you encrypt this in the file format? Makes absolutely zero sense. And if you look around on forums, like I have, some people have been able to crack some of the encryption for reading it. I've been able to find anything that can crack it for writing the CTB file. So the unfortunate thing of what that means is that means we here at Land Effects cannot create a better dialog box that would be tied to the preferences screen so that I can just look at a CTB file, or better yet, I can have a really nice dialog box that says on the left, here's the Land Effects color standards, and on the right, here's your color standards, and you make your changes and it edits a CTB file. Wouldn't that be great? I agree. We can't do that because Autodesk, in their unfailing wisdom, chose instead to just make STB files and not actually just simply make what would make sense, which would be a CTBX file format, which would be just a CTB file in a standard XML open standard that can be read and written by any piece of software. Maybe someday they will, right? That we can just keep hoping.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, I think we're going to say this was the best ducking webinar we've ever done. And we're going to just end a little early here. I think we still qualify for that 1 hour of continuing ed independent study. If you want to write that down in your form, I'll approve that. And keep the ideas and the questions coming. And also, I want to put a shout out that we did just schedule a future webinar to go over everything plotting. So that will touch bases on this a little again, as well as sheet setup and of course plotter setup. So that will be coming. So if that appeals to you, if there's certain things you want to see in a future webinar, always please feel free to email us or even call us and let us know what sort of webinar content you want. And so that helps us to make the webinar content that's actually going to appeal to you. So other than that, I want to wish everybody a very safe, happy, fun, wonderful weekend. It's sun's shining here. I know some of you have snow, but we have great weather here. But have a great weekend, everybody.
All right. Thanks, everyone.